Hi, this is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast. Sometimes when I'm looking for information about my blogs or something to write about my blogs, I come across some really what I consider to be some interesting and fun questions. And one of those questions that I recently came about and I answered in one of my blogs is, are there dead bodies inside the Great Wall of China? Now, I have been to the Great Wall of China, and when I was there, I honestly never really thought much about this question or about much about the wall or how the wall was made or about the people that were constructing the wall. I was just in such awe when I was, there and just seeing the wall itself and walking the wall and traveling the wall and seeing how when you go to the wall outside of Beijing there, how you can just see it for miles and miles and miles. You can just keep on walking and walking and walking. And truly, if you have not been to the Great Wall of China, it is quite an experience to go there and to see the Great Wall of China. But today I want to talk a little bit about the workers of the wall, because the Great Wall of China has also been termed by many as the longest cemetery on earth. There's no exact number of the number of people who died during the wall's construction. It's been estimated anywhere between 400,000 to 1 million people. And it could even be more than that, because you have to remember this wall has been used to keep the so-called barbarians out of China for centuries. So there was fighting along that wall. So there could be many, many more bodies there than what we know. What we know is there are no records of the total number of people who worked on the wall and who died building the wall, that there was no records kept. So I want to talk a little bit about why the Great Wall and why people could have died during the time of the building of the Great Wall, and why it can also be called the longest cemetery on earth. First of all would be the attack by the warring states. The Great Wall was built to protect China from the warring factions and states, especially those coming down from the north. The building of the Great Wall did not stop these attacks, so many people would have died just simply trying to defend the wall. You could imagine it'd be like anything. Somebody's building a wall, somebody wants to attack you, they're going to come and they're going to try to, attack you at where they consider to be your weakest point or where maybe you're building the wall. They're going to try to enter and come in over that wall. So there would have been a lot of, deaths happening just by the defense of the wall itself. The other reason was that it was very, very poor working conditions. Would have been extremely challenging for those that were working on the wall. Many people would have died just from these very poor working conditions. There was not enough food. A lot of the workers were given just enough food to keep them alive and not to have complete starvation. So many of them simply would not have had enough food and would have just starved to death. There would have been a lot of rocks falling on the workers. You have to remember that they're taking these massive rocks to be able to build these walls, and there probably would have been many workers that would have died just by a rock falling on them, that they would not have been able to survive. Many of them died from pure exhaustion and disease. They were worked very, very hard on the wall. The workers on the Great Wall of China understood and knew that it was a terrible place to work and that they were working in appalling working conditions, even terrible for the time that they were living. There were several types of workers that were actually on the wall and working on the wall. And many times we don't think about all these workers. But according to historical data, the Great Wall comprised of three groups, mainly soldiers, ordinary people, and criminals. Soldiers were one of the main groups who worked on the Great Wall during 500 to 555 AD. The soldiers were ordered to work on the wall. So in other words, they were being forced to work on the wall. They maybe didn't want to work on the wall, but the government was essentially forcing them and telling them they needed to work on the wall. Many of these soldiers came from other parts of China. And so, they'd feel homesick, they'd feel lonely, and maybe they were forced to go there. Maybe they did something wrong. So they were given this terrible assignment that they had to go work on the wall. It's been estimated during the Qi dynasty that at least 300,000 soldiers were part of the Great Wall construction crew. And it took them 9 years to finish this section of the wall that they were working on. And of those 300,000, you can bet that many of those soldiers would have died on the construction of the wall. These soldiers, many of them, as I said before, came from other parts of China. And China wanted them to feel at home. So many times the court ordered that some of the widows to marry these soldiers so the soldiers could feel like they felt at home and they had a family there. There were ordinary people who worked on the wall. Millions of ordinary Chinese citizens were ordered to work on the Great Wall. Many of these ordinary citizens were peasants. They were poor, and that millions of peasants were required to help build the wall. Then the section of the Su Wall that was built from 581 to 618, which is near Inner Mongolia, at least 1 million men were required to help build the wall. This was a significant burden on the ordinary people because many times almost all the men were forced to make the Great Wall, that even children were asked to join this construction. And what this meant is they were not able to really tend to their farms and their fields and their other things at home. And so, in the process, many of their families might have been starving, or their farms or other things were not being taken care of because they were essentially being forced to be able to work on the Great Wall. And this became quite a problem. Women also at this time did not want to have a son because they were afraid that if they had a son or they had a male child, that child would then be forced to work on wall construction, because many women lost their husbands while they were working on the Great Wall. So you can imagine the burden that this had upon the ordinary peasants and the ordinary people. That it was a lot of these ordinary people that ended up having to work on this wall, and it became a great burden for them, for their lives and for their families and for their farms. That, the wives had to try to, work on the farms, take care of the home, take care of the children, and their children and husbands were also being forced to work on this wall. So the Great Wall of China caused great hardships to the peasants, their families. There was famine, there was poverty, and there was many other issues going on that happened. So if you calculate the human cost of the Great Wall, it was not just the workers, but it was also their families that they left behind that made this wall extremely costly. And we have no record of how many of their families actually died of famine or starvation or other things because their husbands were working on the wall. The last group, which many people have heard about, is the criminals and how the criminals worked on the Great Wall of China. Many criminals were forced to work on the Great Wall. The labor was a punishment for them and their crimes. During the daytime, many of these criminals were ordered to take turns patrolling and guarding the wall. Then at night, they had to build the wall. They didn't get much sleep or much food. Many of them just died from pure exhaustion and hunger. And according to laws of the time, the criminals were required to serve at least 4 years of hard labor for the Great Wall of China. So many of the workers, would have just maybe have died there. Going back to the original question, are there dead bodies buried inside the wall? I don't think there's dead bodies buried inside the wall because, putting a dead body between two stones would actually make sure that eventually that body would decompose and it would really hurt the structure of the wall itself. They could be buried under some stones or parts of the wall, like in the center part of the wall. But more than likely, they were probably buried near the wall. Somewhere near the wall, there's probably a lot of dead bodies buried. In the wall itself, they would have understood that, the body would decompose and the structure would have hurt the wall, or they would have had to simply rebuild that part of the wall. But they probably would not have actually put them inside that wall. There's no evidence at all to show that. but certainly there will be a lot of dead bodies around the wall, maybe even under the wall, maybe even under a big stone slab or something like that. But it's not likely that they were buried right in the wall structure itself, but around the area. Because those, as I said before, those decomposing bodies would have hurt the overall structure of that wall. This is Anita from Dusty Roads podcast, and we hope that you've enjoyed this, that you will join our community, you will become part of our community, that you will check out our blog, A Bus on a Dusty Road, where we talk about all things to do about travel, the world, being a global citizen, history, because we really believe it's all about living your life as a global citizen. Thank you so much for listening. We truly do appreciate you and your support. We realize that without you, this would not be possible. Thank you so much.